You're listening to Crime Stands Still, Deep Cuts. I'm your host, Carrie Drobin, and tonight we go underground into the suffocating earth of a suburban Chicago home where the walls whispered secrets and the crawl space became a mausoleum. I'm talking, of course, about John Wayne Gacy's basement of horrors. But before I begin, I have a favor to ask. If you like my podcast, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. It helps me bring you more stories like this. And if you're interested in knowing more about people like Gacy, their pathology, their psychopathy, check out my book, Surviving a Psychopath, available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. And a disclaimer. The story of John Wayne Gacy's crimes and discovery are graphic and brutal. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Picture this. 8213 West Summerdale Avenue, a split-level ranch in Norwood Park. White siding, red trim, a cheerful clown painting over the fireplace. From the outside, a home like any other. Inside, a smell lingered, sweet, putrid, like rotting fruit. Gacy called it sewer backup. His neighbors thought little of it, but that stench? Behind the floorboards, through a small opening just 28 inches wide, was a crawl space. Dirt floor, damp, claustrophobic. Gacy crawled down there with a flashlight and lime powder, often dragging a body wrapped in plastic, whispering to himself that he was, quote, making room for another. Gacy described the space in several of his tapes used for trial as his, quote, own graveyard. The echoes down there were different, muted, almost reverent, as if the ground itself knew what it held. He stacked the bodies in layers, covering them with lime to mask the decay, positioning some head to chest like macabre puzzle pieces. 29 young men and boys buried under his home. Another 4 dumped in the Des Plaines River. What's perhaps most chilling isn't the crawl space itself, but Gacy's casual, almost practical approach to murder. In his trial tapes, Gacy tells his attorneys about the night in 1972 when he had a body in his spare bedroom and also a wake to attend with his wife. His, quote, solution was shockingly simple. Right in front of the closet that opens into the trap into the basement, he said, I opened up the trap and I just threw him down there. The way he recounts it, like discarding trash before an appointment, reveals a mind utterly devoid of empathy. And when Gacy cut his hand during the stabbing, he wasn't worried about killing, only about explaining the wound to his wife. He told her he'd nicked it with a carpet cutter. At the wake, his sister urged him to go to the hospital, but Gacy smiled, played the part of the family man, all the while knowing a young man's body was hidden beneath his floorboards. His first kill in 1972 was Timothy McCoy. Gacy lured McCoy, a 16-year-old traveling alone from the Greyhound bus terminal. The boy wasn't a runaway. He was just passing through. After spending the night at Gacy's home, McCoy innocently began making breakfast with a kitchen knife in his hand. Gacy later told investigators he interpreted this as a threat, seized the knife, and stabbed McCoy repeatedly. Only after did Gacy notice that the table was set, the eggs and bacon ready. McCoy hadn't been attacking, he had been cooking. Nonetheless, Gacy buried him in the crawl space, and in that moment, something clicked. He later said killing gave him, quote, a mind-numbing orgasm. McCoy's death wasn't just the first, it was the turning point when murder became entwined with sex, power, and release. After McCoy, Gacy's killings went dormant for about 2 years, but the memory of the thrill gnawed at him. He discovered that targeting vulnerable young men, runaways, boys estranged from their families, reduced the risk of anyone reporting them missing. This became his first modus operandi: prey on those who wouldn't be quickly missed. McCoy's death had been chaotic, almost accidental, but by the late 1970s, Gacy's killings became methodical. He balanced his double life with ease. No one could possibly have suspected John Wayne Gacy, successful building contractor and married man and father. He was well known and respected in his suburban Chicago community. He became heavily involved in local politics and was named J.C. Junior Chamber of Commerce Man of the Year. He even escorted President Jimmy Carter's wife Rosalind on one of her visits to Chicago. He was a ruthless predator who tortured, raped, and strangled 33 young men between 1972 and his arrest in 1978, and buried most of them under his own house. Murder to him was not extraordinary. It was a problem to be managed, and the problem of explaining blood to his wife, the problem of storing another body, the problem of the smell. By 1974, the killings resumed. Gacy had refined his approach. He offered jobs with PDM contractors. PDM was his contracting business. He promised higher wages than teenagers could find elsewhere, and almost immediately he blurred the line between boss and predator, making aggressive sexual advances. Those who resisted risked violence. Those who submitted risked never leaving. McCoy's burial taught Gacy that his crawl space could serve as a private graveyard. He dug trenches, sometimes enlisting his own employees to do the heavy labor, without them realizing, of course, what they were preparing the ground for. Maybe Gacy had taken a page out of Hitler's playbook. Over time, Gacy shifted from occasional violence to a compulsive cycle: lure, control, kill, bury. By 1975, John Bukovich, an 18-year-old PDM employee who confronted Gacy about unpaid wages, disappeared. His car and belongings were found abandoned, but Chicago police did little follow-up. 1976 to 78, Gacy's murders escalated. By now, he had perfected his second modus operandi: tricking victims into putting on handcuffs under the pretense of showing them a magic trick. Once hooked, they were helpless. This ritual, born from improvisation with McCoy, transformed into a rehearsed performance, Gacy's sadistic handcuff trick. Investigators first zoomed in on Gacy when a 15-year-old boy named Robert Piest from Des Plaines, Illinois, went missing under unusual circumstances. Piest's mom was picking him up from a job at a pharmacy, and he told her he'd be out in a few minutes. He first wanted to talk to a man who was offering him a contracting job. Isn't it amazing that those moments, those tiny fractions of judgment, can irrevocably alter somebody's life? That was the last time his mother saw him. When police called Gacy asking about the missing kid, Gacy got defensive, which led the police to do a background check in 1978. They found that Gacy had been on parole to Chicago from Iowa, and he had served prison time for sodomy of a teenage boy. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but he only served 18 months. Well, that should tell you something about our wonderful justice system. Several other men who worked for Gacy were also reported missing. During various searches of Gacy's house, investigators found driver's licenses related to missing persons, as well as a class ring with the initials JS on them, belonging to John Zeig, a young man who had gone missing as well. Investigators also found pornography, shackles, and 2 books titled Gay Love Letters and Pretty Boys Must Die. Gacy explained that the encounters with his victims often happened by chance. For example, he would pull up to a traffic light and see someone waiting for the bus. One victim, Jeff Rignall, said he got in the car to smoke a joint, and shortly after he got in, Gacy placed a rag over his face, which turned out to be chloroform. Rignall was strapped down in a torture wood, chains suspended from the ceiling, and was beaten, raped, chloroformed, drugged, and beaten again. After the attack, Gacy drove Rignall back to the area where he was picked up and left him there, half-clothed. Gacy realized early on that he was being surveilled, but being a first-class manipulator, he started inviting investigators to join him for breakfast. He would even tell them in the morning where he was going so they wouldn't get lost. Back up the bus for a minute. Rignall. If he left Rignall there, half-clothed, why didn't Rignall go to the police? At one point, Gacy asked police officers to come into his home for dinner, which turned out to be a huge mistake. When the heat kicked in, one member of the surveillance team, Robert Schultz, smelled a horrific odor of decaying flesh coming from the bathroom. Can you imagine this? Being at dinner as a guest in Gacy's home, and then suddenly being inundated with the odor of decaying flesh? December 1978, suspicion turned into a warrant. Well, about time. Detectives descended into the crawl space and they hit pay dirt, literally. The excavation took months. Cadaver dogs refused to enter. That tells you something. The smell clung to uniforms, to skin, to memory. One officer compared it to a, quote, a slaughterhouse gone rancid. In all, 29 bodies buried were excavated from the crawl space. Millions of worms were feeding on the corpses. One investigator said, "I had seen dead people before, but nothing like this." Initially, investigators had just started looking for the body of Piest, but when they found 3 femur bones, they knew they had stumbled upon something bigger. Weirdly, Gacy later sued the Des Plaines Police Department for harassment. When Gacy was arrested finally, and after he smiled in his mugshot, he told investigators the truth about what happened with Piest. He said Piest was getting ready to leave the pharmacy when he came to his car for a job application. Gacy asked him to hop in his car to fill out the application, and then told Piest he didn't have the necessary paperwork, but only lived a block away. At the house, Gacy told Piest he entertained kids as a clown and showed Piest a magic trick, putting handcuffs on himself and then taking them off. When Piest showed bewilderment, Gacy told him he'd show him the trick, but Piest struggled and couldn't get the cuffs off. "I reached into my pocket and said, 'The trick is to have the key,'" Gacy told investigators. "Once I had Piest shackled, he was pretty much mine at that point." He said he did the rope trick, strangling Piest by twisting the rope 3 times. Then he dumped Piest's body in the Des Plaines River. During the confession, Gacy showed no emotion. His confessions would often change, and sometimes even denied crimes he had just confessed to. He was like a chameleon, one investigator said. What sane person goes out and does something like this, talks about it, confesses to it, and then says he didn't do it? His sister said in the documentary, "How can he be so smart and intelligent and then so evil?" In the over 15 hours of unedited, completely graphic audio of Gacy, he crafted some story, some version of a defense in his own mind. He blamed his victims and his alter ego, which he created, named Jack Hanley. This is classic psychopathy, right? Deflecting accountability. Nothing is ever his fault, even though, as detectives pointed out, he had literally confessed to the crimes. At one point, Gacy told investigators that he might have slept in the same house as a dead body, but he never had sex with it, although his alter ego, Jack, might have. It quickly dawned on investigators that Gacy might be using the insanity defense by claiming he had multiple personality disorder, a suspicion that became validated when investigators found a criminal law book among Gacy's possessions with a chapter on the insanity defense bookmarked. Throughout the investigation, Gacy would talk about Michael Rossi and David Cram, whom he said were involved in the murders too. Gacy said he couldn't fit in the crawl space himself, so the two young men dug trenches for him. Rossi did not cooperate with authorities and lawyered up right away, but said he was told to pour lime in the crawl space to cover the odor. He claimed he didn't know why the smell was there or where it came from. Both Cram and Rossi have denied their involvement. Gacy said in the murder of John Syke, the one with a ring, he came home to find Rossi and Syke there. He had a couple drinks, he went to bed, and in the morning he woke up to find Syke dead. I just kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to get involved, Gacy said. Then the body just disappeared. During his testimony, one surviving victim said there was a third person in the house during his torture. Every time he would come to, he saw a person with light hair parted in the middle. This is, by the way, Rignall's testimony. And at one point, another person that wasn't Gacy was giving him oral sex. Accomplices were never identified. Cram died by suicide in 2001, and Rossi has stayed silent and declined to comment all these years. One thing is clear, a detective said of Gacy. He was a pure psychopath. The depth of his lack of empathy was terrifying. That absence of remorse is clear on his tapes. Gacy speaks of his victims almost as if they were to blame for their own deaths. Still, Gacy insisted he wasn't a monster, that victims came to him for a job, money, drugs, whatever. More than once, he said. I wanted to pray, not for me, but for them, for being lost, for being so stupid, he says on the tapes. There's not one of them that didn't die, at least as far as I know, through their own actions or wrongdoing. If you want to say I tempted them, put them into temptation, then yes. But understand this. Everyone who came to my house, there was never a struggle. Nobody was ever forced. Every word, every pause reveals the cold, calculating mind of a psychopath who sees his victims not as people, but as objects in a story that only he controls. And all the while he's torturing and murdering and dumping these bodies in his basement, Gacy is entertaining upstairs. He's having barbecues, he's taking Polaroids. What makes this crawl space so haunting isn't just the brutality, it's the banality. How horror coexisted with suburbia. I mean, we've seen this, not just in Gacy's case, but in other cases where there's a house of horror on the street and no one knows about it, right? How did a man hide 29 bodies under his home while mowing his lawn, waving at his neighbors, shaking hands with mayors, a clown costume tucked in his closet, his Pogo the Clown persona performing at children's hospitals and parades? How does a man who does this be described by neighbors as generous, affable? Few could reconcile that same man was John Wayne Gacy, serial killer, burying bodies beneath their feet. I leave you with that question. How does this happen in plain sight? How do psychopaths live among us and we don't know it? If you want more true crime stories, chilling investigations, and expert analysis, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And for exclusive content, behind the screams, and bonus material, sign up for my newsletter. Meanwhile, stay curious, stay informed, and above all, stay safe.